about someone called Darwin. So we're looking for the sentence that introduces him. And the best clue is that there's one sentence that gives his full name, and then the others talk about him using his surname only. Um, so that is the best clue. Also telling us when he was born and the circumstances of his birth. That's also a way of starting a story. Um, these are exactly the kinds of things that you just would never talk about in academic writing because it wouldn't be that important. But they're telling us about him. We then have so number two has to be the next one, right? Because and that makes sense if we think about the end of the first sentence, into a rich and powerful family. The beginning of the next sentence, his paternal grandfather was Erasmus Darwin. So family to grandfather, that's the coherent kind of progression there. Also, the next one makes the most sense because it's talking about his life. And then his maternal grandfather was Joseph, I think it's Joseph Wedgwood of pottery fame. So rich, but also introducing the idea of science in this sentence. Yeah, so his mother's father, maternal grandfather. So paternal grandfather is his father's father. Maternal grandfather is his mother's father. Yeah. Um, and number one has to be the next one because it's about a contrast. Despite this, he failed to distinguish himself. So his family, we've heard his family are rich and powerful. And he had a famous scientist as a grandfather. Uh, but despite this, even though his family were rich and powerful, he didn't distinguish himself. He didn't show himself to be anything special at all. And then we hear more, first dropping out of medical studies, and subsequently entering Cambridge to study for the profession of clergyman. Um, yeah, so yeah, you become a priest, yeah. So in English, you um you could go and study theology, but in the English church, a clergyman is not like a Catholic priest. They can definitely get married and stuff like that. So it's kind of if your son wasn't very good at anything, you might send him to study to become a priest because he could probably have a reasonably good living in a small church somewhere in England. Yeah. In the Church of England they do, in the Catholic Church they don't. So it was one of the big disagreements that caused the rupture in the church. The Protestant, um, one of the reasons that Protestantism came about is because priests wanted to get married. They don't get married, and Catholic priests don't, but the clergy or the priests in the English church, and also in some of the other Protestant churches, they do get married. Um, so the most favored church is the Anglican, the Church of England. Um, but that's always been the church of um the wealthier traditional parts of Australia. But the Catholic Church is also very big here. But it's traditionally been the church of like the Irish and working class people. Um, yeah, at least until the last 50 years or so, when there's a bunch of other churches, because there's a lot of Orthodox now and Coptic, Maronite. Pope is Catholic. Yeah. Um, yeah. So after sentence one, um, we have to have number four because number five talks about a voyage, and the voyage needs to be introduced somewhere, and we can see that happens at the end of number four, doesn't it? So four and then five. So what we're getting is this is like a biographical paragraph. It's telling us about who this person was. It's telling us about different events in his life. Um, It's again not an academic paragraph because you don't write academic papers that are just someone's life story. Um, even academic historians don't write like this. They already assume that you know who Darwin is, and then they drill down on particular events in his life. Mm. Is referring to a voyage, the 5-year voyage, and we haven't had that introduced yet. It's introduced at the end of number 4. Um, Also, the ship's name was the Beagle, not the Beagle, so this is actually wrong. So I think it was the Beagle, like the dog, Beagle. Mm. It's a coordinating conjunction at the beginning of a sentence, so it's like but, um, kind of, except that we've already got a contrast, so it's a further contrast. So in the sentence before, despite this, establishes a contrast. Um, he was a failure. Um, and then we've got another contrast, yet he was gaining important skills. So it's like we're going back and forth. His family were rich, but despite his family being rich, he wasn't very good. Yet he was learning skills. And then yeah, yeah. Mm. To seize is to like grab something, to take it. Yeah. So it's an informal way of talking about taking an opportunity. Yeah, so it was a navy vessel, naval. Um, so it's an official vessel. It's a the British government. Yeah, it is. It's part of the military. Yeah, but I guess a survey ship would be a non-fighting ship. It's not really supposed to fight. It's supposed to go and investigate. Yeah, so we're talking about because we're talking about yeah, like 150, 200 years ago. Well, the opportunity was to be um, he was going to have a position on a ship, and the ship was bound for the farthest corners of the globe. So the ship was going to be traveling. So the fact that it was bound for those corners um, suggests that there was a voyage. So basically, his family would have been pretty happy because they're trying to figure out what to do with him. He's not good enough to be a doctor. No, he's no good at anything, and then there's this opportunity. Yeah, let's go and he might go and make something of himself, basically. Um, he come back, come back rich and famous, or he'll die, and um, either is fine. So, you asked what a naturalist is. So this is from before we had clear distinctions between the different sciences. So it's someone who's interested in the natural sciences. But the word biologist didn't exist yet. Um, I think it's usually more of a passive construction. That is, a series of events establish someone as something. Um, like to establish is to build or to bring together. You can talk about, if you use it actively, the president established a new presidential library in Dallas. So, or this foundation established a new school. So you would talk about literally creating a building or a new institution, and then you would use an active voice. But if you're using a passive voice like this, something happened and it established him. So it's not about what he did, it's about him being established as by this process. It's not quite passive voice, but it's a passive construction. Um, to be established as, yeah. So you would say um, more like that series of publications established his reputation. So it came about through something. So a series of high-profile publications established his reputation as a prominent voice in that subfield.